I'm Rachel Morgan, 32 years old, and my life shattered during Thanksgiving dinner. The crystal chandelier glittered above our family's mahogany table as my father Howard tapped his glass. "We're selling Morgan Industries," he announced, scanning familiar faces. "Everyone at this table gets a share. Everyone except you, Rachel." Silence fell like a guillotine. My sister Stephanie's lips curled into a smirk as my wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the floor, red liquid spreading like blood across imported marble. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for a family betrayal story that'll make your holiday drama seem like a picnic. Morgan Industries wasn't just a company to me. It was my heritage, my future, and for the past decade, my entire life. When other MBA graduates from Harvard Business School were accepting six-figure positions at prestigious consulting firms, I declined 3 lucrative offers to start at the bottom of my family's manufacturing business. Not because it was easier, in fact, it was quite the opposite. "You'll get no special treatment," my father had warned when I approached him after graduation. His steel gray eyes, the same ones I'd inherited, studied me with skepticism. "You'll start in customer service like anyone else." And I did. For 2 years, I handled complaints, processed orders, and learned every product specification until I could recite them in my sleep. I arrived first and left last, earning my promotions through merit rather than nepotism. By 30, I had revolutionized our operations department, streamlined our supply chain, and introduced sustainable practices that saved millions annually. The crowning achievement came just 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving, when I secured a $50 million contract with Westbrook Innovations, a deal that pulled Morgan Industries back from the brink during an NT2 economic downturn that had bankrupted 2 of our competitors. "That's my girl," Dad had said then, actually hugging me in front of the entire executive team. That rare moment of approval felt like winning an Olympic gold medal. How quickly things would change. The family dynamics at Morgan Industries had always been complicated. My father, Howard Morgan, now 65, had built the company from a small factory into a multi-million-dollar enterprise through relentless work and sacrifice. After my mother died of cancer when I was 15, he remarried within 18 months to Barbara, the former office manager who was 10 years his junior. Barbara brought 2 children into our family, my half-sister Stephanie, now 27, and my stepbrother Tyler, 29. Neither had shown much interest in the actual work of running a business. Stephanie held the title Director of Creative Development, a position created specifically for her after she dropped out of her 3rd college program. Her main contributions involved occasionally suggesting new product colors and planning the extravagant company parties that Barbara insisted were necessary for corporate culture. Tyler's position as executive liaison meant he occasionally attended meetings between golf outings and weekends in Aspen. He drove a company-leased Maserati and had an expense account that would make a Hollywood producer blush. Meanwhile, my apartment in Boston was modest, filled with industry awards rather than expensive furniture. I drove a practical Audi, invested most of my salary, and spent my rare free time reading business journals or attending manufacturing conferences. The contrast between us couldn't have been more stark. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Barbara and I had a heated exchange about company direction. She wanted to outsource production to cut costs. I argued for investing in automation to maintain quality and American jobs. Surprisingly, my father sided with me in that meeting. "Rachel's numbers make sense," he'd said, silencing Barbara's protests. "We'll move forward with her proposal." The triumph was short-lived. Looking back, that was the moment everything changed. Barbara's eyes had narrowed as she smiled tightly and said, "Whatever you think is best, Howard." I should have recognized the danger in her too easy surrender. I should have seen the signs. Instead, I returned to my office, pleased that logic and business sense had prevailed, completely unaware that behind closed doors, a plan was already in motion to remove me entirely from the company my grandfather had founded. The morning before Thanksgiving, my father called to confirm I would attend dinner at their estate in Wellesley. Barbara's gone all out this year, he mentioned. There's something important to discuss. I assumed it was about the automation project I'd championed. I even prepared a brief presentation on my tablet, ready to show the latest projections. I wore my lucky navy suit, the one I'd worn when landing the Westbrook deal, and arrived with a bottle of my father's favorite scotch. The housekeeper, Clara, who had known me since childhood, gave me an odd look when I arrived. "Miss Rachel," she said, taking my coat, "you look nice tonight." There was something in her tone, pity, perhaps, that I didn't understand until later. As I approached the dining room, I heard laughter. Barbara, Stephanie, Tyler, and several board members, including my father's college friend Thomas and his wife Patricia, were gathered with cocktails. The conversation died as I entered. "Rachel!" Barbara air-kissed my cheek. "We were just discussing the exciting news." "What news?" I asked, accepting the gin and tonic Tyler handed me. "All in good time," my father said, gesturing toward the dining table. "Let's eat first." Little did I know I was walking into an ambush that would destroy everything I had worked for. As the turkey was carved and wine poured, I had no idea that by dessert, my place in the company, and in the family, would be completely severed. The drive from Wellesley to my apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood passed in a blur. Thanksgiving night traffic was light, but I barely noticed the Christmas decorations already illuminating Boylston Street, or the light snowfall beginning to dust the sidewalks. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Amanda and Jessica, friends who had witnessed my humiliation at dinner, calling to check on me. I silenced it, unable to speak about what had happened. My apartment felt sterile when I entered, a place to sleep between workdays rather than a home. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the sofa, still wearing my coat. The wall across from me displayed my MBA diploma, alongside industry recognition awards. 10 years of dedication, reduced to worthless paper in a single dinner announcement. "Everyone at this table gets a share. Everyone except you, Rachel." I pulled out a photo album my mother had started before her death. Pictures of me as a small child following my father around the factory floor, wearing an oversized hard hat, looking up at him with adoration. Another from my 16th birthday, just after Mom died, where Dad and I stood awkwardly beside a cake, both trying to smile through grief. My Harvard graduation, where he actually looked proud as I received my degree. "What did I do wrong?" I whispered to the images, tears finally breaking through the shock. "How could you do this to me?" Sleep never came. As dawn broke over Boston Harbor, my phone chimed with an email notification. Benjamin Hargrove, the company lawyer, had sent a message with the subject line, "Termination Package." The offer was insulting: 2 months severance pay and healthcare continuation for 60 days. No explanation for my termination. No recognition of my contributions. No shares in the company sale that would make my siblings multimillionaires. Just a PDF attachment with cold legal language requiring my signature to waive all rights to contest my dismissal. My first instinct was to call my father, but when I tried, the call went straight to voicemail. I tried my office line next, only to hear an automated message. "The extension you have dialed is no longer in service." Panic rising, I logged into my work email. Access denied. My company-issued laptop refused my password. Everything had been revoked overnight, as if a decade of my life had been erased with a keystroke. I dressed quickly, fueled by a mixture of rage and disbelief, and drove to the Morgan Industries headquarters in Cambridge. The security guard who had greeted me every morning for years blocked my entry. "I'm sorry, Miss Morgan," he mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. "Your access has been terminated. I have instructions not to let you in the building." "This is ridiculous, Paul. Call my father." "Can't do that, ma'am. Security protocol." He gestured to a stack of boxes on a cart beside him. "Your personal items are here. They said to tell you your parking pass needs to be surrendered." My entire office life sat in 3 cardboard boxes. Family photos, my Harvard mug, desk plants, and a few books. 10 years reduced to items that fit on a luggage cart. As I struggled to carry them to my car, I spotted Megan from HR watching from the lobby. I set the boxes down. "Megan, what's happening? There must be some mistake." She approached cautiously, glancing around as if afraid to be seen talking to me. "It's not a mistake, Rachel. The termination was processed yesterday morning. Everyone knew except you." "Yesterday morning? Before the dinner? Before the announcement?" She nodded, discomfort evident in her expression. "Your system access was scheduled for deactivation at midnight. The boxes were packed yesterday afternoon while you were in your quarterly budget meeting." The premeditation stunned me. While I had been reviewing quarterly projections, someone had been boxing up my life, knowing I wouldn't be returning. While I had been selecting wine to bring to Thanksgiving dinner, my termination paperwork was already prepared. "Who authorized this?" I demanded. "I can't discuss that," Megan said, backing away. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I really am." As she retreated into the building, I noticed security guards watching from the entrance. I was now an outsider, a potential threat to be monitored. I loaded the boxes into my trunk, hands shaking with anger and humiliation. Driving away from the building that had been my second home, I caught a glimpse of Barbara's white Mercedes pulling into the executive parking area. She didn't see me, but the satisfied smile on her face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just business, this was personal. And it had been planned for far longer than I had realized. Back in my apartment, I emptied the boxes, looking for clues. Among the personal items was a company anniversary plaque I'd received just 2 months earlier, commemorating my valuable contributions and continued success with Morgan Industries. The timing now seemed like a cruel joke. At the bottom of the third box, I found something unexpected, a sticky note with my assistant Kayla's handwriting. "Call me secure line only." Beneath was a phone number I didn't recognize. Whatever had happened, whatever conspiracy had led to my sudden expulsion from both company and family, it seemed at least one person was willing to talk. And that was the first thread I needed to pull to unravel this betrayal. The following morning, I met Kayla at a small coffee shop in Somerville, far from Morgan Industries and any potential corporate spies. My assistant of 3 years arrived wearing sunglasses despite the overcast November day, nervously scanning the room before sliding into the booth across from me. "I'm risking everything by meeting you," she said, removing her glasses to reveal tired eyes. "They made everyone in the executive wing sign additional NDAs yesterday afternoon." "Why would they do that?" "To keep what they did to you quiet." Kayla pulled a flash drive from her purse. "I've been making copies of certain documents for the past month. Something felt off when they started scheduling board meetings without you." "Board meetings? What meetings?" "At least 6 in the past 3 weeks. Always when you were out of the office or with clients. Barbara insisted they be kept off the main calendar." I felt sick. That's why she suddenly encouraged me to handle the Chicago client visits personally. She wanted me gone. "Exactly." Kayla glanced around before continuing. "There's more. That $50 million Westbrook deal you landed? There's documentation showing Stephanie as the primary contact and deal architect. They've been systematically rewriting your contributions for months." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. The Westbrook deal had required everything I had. Sleepless nights, detailed proposals, multiple presentations. I had earned that victory, and now my sister was taking credit. "Barbara orchestrated most of it," Kayla continued. "She's deleted emails, altered reports, and convinced your father you were undermining the company's value before the sale." "And my father believed this?" Kayla hesitated. I think he wanted to believe it. The potential buyers, Meridian Capital, initially offered less than he hoped. Barbara convinced him the company would be worth more without. Complications. "I'm a complication?" The word stung. According to the narrative they created, yes. "Tyler has been telling key clients you were becoming mentally unstable and difficult to work with. The story they're spinning is that you were angry about the potential sale and trying to sabotage it." My coffee sat untouched, growing cold as each new betrayal was revealed. After Kayla left for work, I retreated to a quiet corner of the cafe to examine the flash drive contents. What I found left me breathless with anger. Meeting minutes showing decisions I supposedly opposed that had never been discussed with me. Emails from my account that had been edited to make innocent questions seem like challenges to authority. Financial projections altered to make my department appear less profitable than it was. As I scrolled through the documents, a familiar voice nearby caught my attention. At a table behind me, partially obscured by a decorative plant, sat my father and Barbara. "Howard, you need to stop worrying. Rachel will take the settlement," Barbara was saying. "She has no choice. We've made sure of that." "It still doesn't feel right," my father replied, his voice weary. "After everything she's done for the company." "What she's done," Barbara's voice sharpened. "What about what she was planning to do? The separate deals? The client poaching?" We caught it just in time. I froze, barely breathing. What separate deals? What client poaching? These were complete fabrications. I know, my father sighed. "I just wish there had been another way." "There wasn't," Barbara insisted. "Meridian was clear. They want a clean transition with no potential competition from former executives. The sale needs to close before year-end for the tax advantages. We did what was necessary." They paid their bill and left without spotting me. I remained frozen, laptop open to the evidence of their systematic campaign against me. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was character assassination. They had created a fictional version of me, a disloyal daughter planning to undermine the family business, to justify cutting me out of my inheritance. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Michael Chen, a former colleague who had left the company 6 months earlier. "Rachel, I've been trying to reach you. I heard what happened." "How bad is it, Michael?" His hesitation told me everything. "They've been building a case against you since summer. Barbara started by questioning your expense reports in management meetings. Then came suggestions about your emotional stability. After I defended you, I found myself pushed out too." "She's been planning this for that long?" "At least. Rachel, I need to tell you, they accessed your personal emails through the company server. Anything you wrote on company devices, they have it. And they're not above taking things out of context." I thought about the venting emails I'd sent to friends after difficult days, the occasional complaints about Barbara's interference, my father's criticism. Normal frustrations any employee might express, now potentially weaponized against me. That evening, I created a detailed timeline of events leading to my termination. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a sudden decision, but a calculated campaign. Barbara had identified me as an obstacle to her plans for the company sale and systematically worked to eliminate me. But the most painful revelation came when I accessed an old backup cloud drive containing company files I'd worked on from home. Among them was an audio recording from a strategy meeting 6 months earlier when we first discussed potential buyers. My father's voice crystal clear. Any sale would need to protect Rachel's position. She's the future of this company, the one who'll carry on the Morgan legacy. Something had changed dramatically in those 6 months. Someone had convinced my father that I was no longer worth protecting, no longer the future he had once envisioned. And as much as I wanted to blame Barbara entirely, I couldn't escape the devastating truth. My father had not just allowed this to happen, he had actively participated in my destruction. The call came at 6:30 a.m., 3 days after Thanksgiving. I was already awake, having spent another night cataloging the evidence Kayla had provided. "Rachel? It's William. William Preston." My godfather's gravelly voice was instantly recognizable, though we hadn't spoken in nearly a year. As my father's oldest friend and co-founder of Morgan Industries, William had retired from active management 5 years ago, but retained a significant ownership stake. "William, I've been meaning to call you." "Not on this line," he interrupted. "Can you meet me at the lake house? Today, if possible. There are things we need to discuss." 2 hours later, I pulled into the driveway of William's property on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. The sprawling cedar home sat on 5 secluded acres, a perfect location for conversations away from prying ears. William's hug was fierce when he greeted me at the door. At 70, he remained imposingly tall, though his once robust frame had thinned with age. The intelligence in his blue eyes hadn't dimmed a bit. "I'm so sorry, Rachel," he said, leading me into his study. "I fought against this, but I was outvoted." "You knew? About cutting me out?" I was blindsided at the final vote. "Barbara presented a dossier of evidence showing you were planning to start a competing business using Morgan proprietary information. Howard was convinced you had betrayed him. That's absurd. I've dedicated my entire adult life to the company." "I know that. But the documents looked convincing. Emails, client communications, even a business plan with your name on it." "They were fabricated, William. I never wrote any of that." "I believe you." He gestured toward a woman sitting quietly in the corner of the room whom I hadn't noticed. "That's why I asked Catherine to join us." Catherine Winters rose to shake my hand. In her early 50s, with a silver pixie cut and sharp gray suit, she exuded competence and authority. "Miss Morgan, I'm an attorney specializing in corporate law and shareholder disputes. William has retained me on your behalf." "I can't afford." "Don't worry about that," William waved away my concern. "This is on me. Catherine, please explain the situation." Catherine opened a leather portfolio. "The sale to Meridian Capital isn't finalized. There's a mandatory shareholder approval meeting in 30 days. If we can prove impropriety in how this deal was structured, or in your termination, we have grounds to contest it." "But I'm not a shareholder," I said. "That's the whole problem." William and Catherine exchanged glances. "Actually, you are," William said. "Do you remember your 18th birthday gift from your grandmother Patricia?" The memory surfaced slowly. Grandma Patricia handing me an envelope at my birthday dinner, winking as she said, "Something for your future, when the time is right." "The trust shares," I whispered. William nodded. "Patricia gave you 5% of her Morgan Industries stock, held in trust until you turned 35, or in case of an emergency. Given the circumstances, I think this qualifies as an emergency." 5% isn't enough to block the sale," Catherine explained, "but it gives you standing to demand information and potentially file for injunctive relief if we find evidence of fraud or breach of fiduciary duty." For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt a flicker of hope. "So, what do we do?" "We build a case," Catherine said simply. "We need evidence of misconduct, substantial enough to convince a judge to pause the sale proceedings." "I have some documentation already," I offered, pulling out my laptop. "My assistant Kayla has been gathering files for weeks." "Kayla Stevens? Sharp girl with the purple glasses?" William asked. When I nodded, he smiled. "She contacted me the day after Thanksgiving. She's the one who alerted me to what was happening." As we reviewed the evidence, Kayla herself arrived, along with David Parker, the IT specialist who had always maintained my company devices. "David's been combing through the server backups," Kayla explained. "He found some interesting deletions. They didn't know about the secondary backup protocol you implemented last year," David added, setting up his own laptop, "the one that archives everything to a secure cloud server." For the next several hours, our improvised team sorted through evidence of the systematic campaign against me. William's Lake House became our command center, with Catherine directing our efforts toward building a legal case, while William provided context on board discussions I'd been excluded from. By evening, a clearer picture had emerged. Barbara, with Tyler's help, had methodically manufactured evidence against me, while reattributing my successes to Stephanie. My father, increasingly focused on maximizing the sale price for his retirement, had been manipulated with selective information and outright lies. "But why?" I asked, staring at the web of deception we'd mapped on a whiteboard. "Why go to these lengths to cut me out?" "Follow the money," Catherine suggested. "The proposed sale price is $180 million. Your father and Barbara control 60%, which means they'd receive $108 million. If you were included in the deal, I'd be entitled to a significant portion as a key executive and family member," I finished. So this is just about greed? Partially, William said thoughtfully. But I think it's also about control. Barbara has always seen you as a threat to her influence over Howard and the company. As we strategized late into the night, I realized something important. This fight wasn't just about money or even justice. It was about reclaiming my professional reputation and standing up for my own worth after years of seeking validation from a father who had ultimately failed me. I'm not fighting for money, I told the group as we concluded our first planning session. I'm fighting for justice, for myself and for the company my grandfather built. They thought I'd just disappear quietly. They were wrong. The guest house at Williams Lake property became our investigation headquarters over the following 2 weeks. Catherine converted the dining room into a legal war room with documents covering every surface. David set up a secure computer network, ensuring our digital footprints remained untraceable. My first task was contacting former clients who had mysteriously taken their business elsewhere in recent months. According to company records, these accounts had been lost due to my difficult attitude and unreasonable demands. Miss Morgan, this is unexpected, said James Wilson, purchasing director at Caltech Industries, when I reached him. I was told you had moved on from Morgan. Moved on? By whom? Your brother, Tyler. He said you'd left for a competitor and that we should direct all communication through him going forward. Similar conversations with 6 other clients revealed the same pattern. Tyler or Barbara had informed them I was no longer with the company weeks or even months before my actual termination, effectively cutting me out of client relationships I had spent years building. Meanwhile, David made a breakthrough by accessing Barbara's password-protected cloud storage. She's not as tech-savvy as she thinks, he explained, showing me folders of financial documents. She used the same password for everything and stored the backup codes in a text file. Among the documents was evidence of an offshore account in the Cayman Islands receiving what appeared to be consulting fees from several Morgan Industries suppliers. The account was registered to a shell company with Barbara's maiden name buried in corporate filings. She's been taking kickbacks, Catherine confirmed after reviewing the documents. Suppliers pay her consulting company, and in return, she ensures they keep their contracts with Morgan Industries, regardless of pricing. Even more damning was what Kayla discovered while organizing Stephanie's expense reports. My sister had been in Aruba during the critical week when she supposedly finalized the Westbrook deal that was actually my achievement. She couldn't have been in those meetings, Kayla pointed out. She was posting beach photos on Instagram while you were pulling all-nighters on the proposal. The most shocking revelation came from David's recovery of deleted server files. Tyler had been systematically embezzling from the company for over 2 years, creating fake vendor accounts that funneled payments to his personal accounts. Based on these records, he's taken nearly $3 million, David said, showing us the transaction history. And look at the timing. Large withdrawals always coincide with his trips to Vegas. A gambling problem, William sighed. I suspected as much when he asked me for a loan last year. Catherine organized our findings methodically, building a comprehensive case document. The proposed buyer, Meridian Capital, is concerning as well, she noted. Their principal investor is Richard Harmon. Barbara's brother? I asked, surprised. The very same. Which explains the below-market valuation and unusual terms. This isn't just a sale. It's practically a giveaway to family with kickbacks built in. One critical piece remained missing. Direct evidence of my father's knowledge. While the documents showed Howard had signed off on many questionable decisions, we couldn't prove he fully understood the deception being perpetrated. That changed when William convinced James Bradford, a longtime board member and my father's friend, to meet with us privately. James looked miserable as he sat in William's study, refusing coffee and avoiding my eyes. I shouldn't be here, he muttered. If Howard knew. James, we need the truth, William said gently. Did Howard know what was happening to Rachel? After a long pause, James nodded. Barbara presented the evidence of Rachel's supposed disloyalty at a special board meeting in October. Howard questioned it initially, but when confronted with the emails and business plan, he became furious. He felt betrayed. "Those documents were fabricated," I insisted. "I had my suspicions," James admitted. But Barbara was very convincing, and Howard wanted to believe her. When I suggested an investigation before taking action, Barbara argued that any delay would jeopardize the sale. He looked at me directly for the first time. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have fought harder." As James left, promising to consider providing a formal statement, William pulled out a dusty file box from his study closet. "There's one more thing you should see," he said, extracting a yellowed document. "Your grandmother Patricia's original stock certificate and transfer documentation for your trust shares. Barbara may have convinced the board to exclude you from the sale proceeds as an employee, but these shares are legally yours. They can't take them away." Examining the decades-old papers that secured my position as a shareholder, I felt a rush of gratitude for my grandmother's foresight. She had ensured I would always have a voice in the company, even if others tried to silence me. By the end of our second week of investigation, we had assembled a devastating case. Evidence of kickbacks, embezzlement, fraudulent client communications, and deliberate defamation of my character to justify my exclusion from the company's sale. "We have enough to approach the board directly," Catherine advised. "We could file for an emergency injunction, but giving them a chance to correct course might be strategically wiser." "I want to confront them myself," I decided. "Not in a boardroom, not with lawyers present initially. I want to see their faces when they realize what I know." "That's risky," Catherine cautioned. "But effective," William countered. "If we're going to resolve this without destroying the company in the process, Howard needs to see Rachel face to face. He needs to be confronted with what he's done." The plan was set. I would make an unexpected appearance at the family's traditional Sunday dinner, where Barbara, Howard, Tyler, and Stephanie would all be present. William would ensure a board meeting was scheduled for the following day where our full evidence could be presented if my confrontation didn't yield results. As we finalized preparations, I discovered a small wooden box in the bottom of my evidence files, my mother's jewelry box that had somehow been packed with my office belongings. Inside was a handwritten note in my mother's writing, dated just weeks before her death. "Rachel, my brilliant daughter. Trust your instincts and stand your ground. The company will need your strength someday. Never forget your worth isn't measured by your father's approval. Love always, Mom." Her words, reaching across 15 years, gave me the final courage I needed. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. Sunday dinner at the Morgan family estate had been a tradition since my grandfather's time. Even after my mother's death and Howard's remarriage to Barbara, the ritual remained unchanged. Cocktails at 5, dinner at 6, everyone dressed appropriately, regardless of personal plans or preferences. As I drove through the ornate iron gates of the estate that December evening, security cameras tracking my approach, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock and betrayal had crystallized into resolute determination. I was no longer the devastated daughter seeking answers. I was a businesswoman demanding accountability. I had chosen my appearance carefully. A crimson dress that had been my mother's favorite color, subtle makeup, and her pearl earrings, professional but personal. A reminder of whose daughter I truly was. Clara, the housekeeper, opened the front door before I could ring the bell. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Miss Rachel, they didn't say you were coming." "It's a surprise," I replied, handing her my coat. "Are they in the sitting room?" The sound of laughter guided me through the marble foyer. My father, Barbara, Stephanie, and Tyler were gathered around the fireplace with drinks, apparently celebrating something. Their conversation halted abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. "Rachel!" My father recovered first, rising awkwardly from his armchair. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, noting how Stephanie nearly spilled her martini. "But Sunday dinner is family tradition, isn't it?" "And I'm still family," even if I'm no longer welcome at the company. Barbara's smile was tight as she approached. Of course your family, dear. This is just unexpected. We assumed after Thanksgiving that I'd disappear quietly, accept being discarded after 10 years of dedication. That would be convenient, wouldn't it? Now, Rachel, my father began in his boardroom voice. This isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, I interrupted, moving to the center of the room. Before the caterers arrive, before you can hide behind social niceties. Just us. The family that conspired to destroy my career and steal my birthright. Tyler laughed nervously. You're being melodramatic. Nobody conspired against you. Really? I turned to face him, pulling a folder from my purse. So these documents showing you've embezzled $3 million from the company over the past 2 years. That's not a conspiracy? Just a bookkeeping error, perhaps? The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? Vendor account numbers 87392-91047 and 62183. All registered to shell companies that trace back to your personal accounts. All approved under unusual circumstances. All coinciding with your gambling trips to Las Vegas and Macau. Tyler's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. You can't prove anything. I have bank transfers, Tyler. Account numbers, dates, times, signatures. Barbara stepped forward, positioning herself between me and my father. Whatever amateur investigation you think you've conducted, you're making serious allegations without evidence? I cut her off. Like the offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered to Harlow Enterprises? Your maiden name is Harlow, isn't it, Barbara? Interesting coincidence. Her composed facade cracked slightly. You've been hacking into private accounts. That's illegal. No hacking required for public records. The consulting fees from Morgan suppliers are quite substantial. 12% kickbacks adds up quickly, doesn't it? And then there's the matter of Meridian Capital, whose principal investor happens to be your brother Richard. My father's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned. What are you implying, Rachel? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The company is being sold at below market value to a firm controlled by Barbara's brother, after I was systematically removed based on fabricated evidence of disloyalty. Those emails weren't fabricated, Stephanie interjected. We all saw your plans to poach clients. Interesting you should mention that, Stephanie. Especially since you were in Aruba posting bikini photos on Instagram during the week you supposedly finalized the Westbrook deal. I pulled out printed screenshots. Hard to be in 2 places at once, isn't it? Stephanie's face flushed crimson. That's not, Dad knew I was consulting remotely on that deal. Consulting remotely from a yacht with no internet access? While I was pulling all-nighters in the office? The same deal that saved the company and that you're now taking credit for? Enough, my father thundered. Rachel, you come into my home making wild accusations. Not accusations. Evidence. I placed the folder on the coffee table. This is a courtesy visit, Dad. A chance for you to understand what's happening before tomorrow's emergency board meeting where William and I will present all of this and more to the full board and the company's legal team. The mention of William's involvement visibly rattled him. William is retired. He has no say. William holds 15% of company shares and proxy voting rights for another 10% from other retired executives. He's also the trustee for the 5% of shares Grandmother Patricia left to me in trust. Barbara's eyes narrowed. What shares? The ones you apparently didn't know about when you orchestrated this plan. The ones that give me standing as a shareholder to contest this fraudulent sale. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. My father lowered himself back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. Tomorrow at 9, I continued, we'll present evidence of financial misconduct, client manipulation, defamation, and breach of fiduciary duty. The board will have a choice. Cancel the sale and restructure company leadership appropriately, or face a lengthy legal battle that will tie up the company for years and likely result in criminal charges. Tyler lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. You self-righteous bitch! You think you can just waltz in here and threaten us? Tyler, my father barked, but my stepbrother was already in my face. You've always thought you were better than us. Always had to be Daddy's perfect little successor. You couldn't stand that he finally saw through you. I held my ground, meeting his gaze calmly. Is that what you tell yourself to justify stealing from the company? To rationalize lying to clients and fabricating evidence against me? We didn't need to fabricate anything. Stephanie joined in, her voice shrill. You were planning to compete against us. Barbara found your business plan. The business plan dated during the week I was in Tokyo at the manufacturing conference? When I had no access to company servers? That business plan? Barbara stepped between us, her composure returning. Rachel, dear, you're obviously upset. Perhaps it would be better if you left now. We can discuss this with our respective legal teams tomorrow. I'm not upset, Barbara. I'm resolute. And I'm not leaving without saying what I came to say. I turned to my father, who sat watching the confrontation with an unreadable expression. You didn't just betray me, Dad. You betrayed everything this company stands for. Grandfather built Morgan Industries on integrity and quality. In your rush to cash out, you've allowed it to become corrupt from within. I picked up the folder from the table. 9 o'clock tomorrow. If anyone isn't there, I'll take that as confirmation of guilt and proceed accordingly. As I turned to leave, security cameras in the corners of the room caught my eye. The same system that monitored all Morgan properties. A system that automatically recorded and backed up to our secure servers. One more thing, I added, pausing at the doorway. This entire conversation has been recorded through the house security system, the same system Tyler installed last year that feeds directly to company servers. The same servers David has been monitoring since Thanksgiving. Just something to consider before you discuss damage control after I leave. The look of dawning horror on their faces confirmed they'd forgotten about the cameras, the final evidence I needed to complete our case. As I drove away from the estate, I caught a glimpse of the family in the rearview mirror, framed in the doorway, looking shell-shocked and diminished. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt not just determination, but the sweet beginning of vindication. The backlash began at 5:17 a.m. the next morning. My phone rang, displaying Catherine's number. They've hired Bradley Thornton, she said without preamble. Howard's called an emergency executive session before our scheduled board meeting. Bradley Thornton was Boston's most aggressive corporate attorney, infamous for his scorched earth tactics and astronomical fees. His involvement signaled that my family had no intention of resolving this quietly. They're trying to invalidate your shares, Catherine continued, claiming the trust documentation wasn't properly filed with the SEC. That's absurd. Grandmother's lawyers handled everything properly. It's a delay tactic. They're also seeking a gag order to prevent you from discussing company matters, claiming you're violating confidentiality agreements. By 7 a.m., the situation had escalated further. William called to report that 2 police officers had arrived at his lake house with a warrant, claiming Rachel had stolen confidential company documents. They took David's laptop and several boxes of files, William said, his voice tight with anger. Bradley's making good on his reputation. I barely had time to process this when Jessica forwarded me a link to the Boston Business Journal's website. The headline made my stomach drop. Family drama disrupts Morgan Industries sale. Sources cite executives' mental health concerns. The article, clearly planted by someone inside the company, quoted anonymous sources close to the Morgan family, describing my increasingly erratic behavior and paranoid accusations following the announcement of the company's sale. Rachel Morgan, formerly VP of Operations at Morgan Industries, has reportedly made unfounded allegations against family members following her dismissal from the company, the article stated. Sources familiar with the situation describe a troubling pattern of behavior in recent months that ultimately led to her termination. They're trying to discredit you before you can present evidence, Catherine said when I forwarded the article. Classic character assassination. The attacks continued throughout the morning. Kayla called in a panic to report that Barbara had offered her a substantial promotion and bonus to share information about Rachel's activities. When Kayla refused, she was placed on administrative leave. At 10:30 a.m., the superintendent of my apartment building called. "Miss Morgan, the police were here with a warrant to search your apartment. They took your computer and several boxes of files. Something about corporate espionage?" The board meeting that was supposed to be our opportunity to present evidence had been postponed indefinitely due to ongoing legal concerns. In less than 6 hours, Barbara and my father had mobilized a comprehensive counteroffensive designed to isolate me, discredit my claims, and seize our evidence. That afternoon, William was admitted to Massachusetts General Hospital with chest pains. "It's not serious," he assured me by phone from his hospital bed. "Just stress-related angina." "But Rachel, they're playing hardball now." Bradley Thornton contacted Catherine's law firm. "He's threatening to file ethics complaints against her if she continues representing you." "Can he do that?" "He can try. More importantly, Howard has begun calling in favors from everyone who owes him. Judge Carlton, who would likely hear any injunction request we file, just recused himself. Guess who's hosting his daughter's wedding next summer? Morgan Estate." The pressure continued to mount. By evening, Catherine reported that her senior partners were expressing concerns about the case. The firm had apparently received calls from several major clients who also did business with Morgan Industries. "They haven't asked me to drop your case yet," she said grimly, "but the subtext is clear. Your father has considerable influence in Boston." Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get worse, I received a formal settlement offer by courier, a significantly increased termination package of $1 million, contingent upon signing comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements, surrendering all claims to company shares, and dropping all allegations against family members. "It's a desperate move," Catherine noted when I forwarded the offer. "They wouldn't increase the offer by this much if they weren't worried." At midnight, my father called. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but some lingering remnant of daughterly duty made me answer. "Rachel," he sounded tired, his voice lacking its usual authority. "This has gone far enough." "I agree. Tell Barbara to call off Bradley Thornton and drop the false police reports." "You need to understand your position," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You're going against a $100 million company with resources you can't match. Take the settlement. Move on. Start fresh somewhere else." "Is that what Mom would have wanted? For you to bribe your own daughter into silence after stealing her career and reputation?" A long pause followed. "Leave your mother out of this." "Why? She built that company alongside you. She believed in integrity above all else. What would she think of what you've done?" "What I've done," his voice hardened, "is protect a legacy from someone who was planning to undermine it. The evidence is fabricated, and you know it. Deep down, you know Barbara and Tyler created those documents. You know Stephanie has been taking credit for my work. You've allowed yourself to be manipulated because it was easier than standing up for what's right." "That's not true." "Then prove it. Call off the dogs. Look at the evidence yourself, not through Barbara's filter. Be the father and the businessman I grew up respecting." Another long silence. "Take the settlement, Rachel, for the good of the family. We stopped being a family the moment you chose money over your daughter." The call ended without resolution, but something in my father's tone, a hesitation, a note of uncertainty gave me hope that perhaps a seed of doubt had been planted. The next morning brought news that Catherine's firm had officially withdrawn from representing me, citing conflict of interest concerns. Our evidence files remained in police custody as part of an ongoing investigation, and William remained hospitalized, though stable. Barbara's counterattack had been swift and effective, leveraging every connection and resource at her disposal. In just 24 hours, she had neutralized our legal representation, seized our evidence, damaged my credibility, and isolated me from allies. But she had made one critical mistake, underestimating my determination. The settlement offer revealed their vulnerability. The aggressive tactics confirmed they feared exposure. and my father's late-night calls suggested cracks in their unified front. I might be temporarily outmaneuvered, but I was far from defeated. If Barbara wanted to play hardball, she would discover that Howard Morgan's daughter had inherited not just his business acumen, but his tenacity as well. As I considered my next move, a text arrived from an unknown number. Security footage backed up to private server. Still have complete access. D. David had created a backup before the police seized his computer. We still had the evidence. We still had a chance. The battle for Morgan Industries and for justice was far from over. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a crisp December morning, exactly 30 days after the Thanksgiving dinner that had shattered my world. Morgan Industries headquarters gleamed in the winter sunlight, the 12-story glass and steel building my grandfather had commissioned at the height of his success. Despite Barbara's best efforts to derail our case, Catherine had found us new representation through a former colleague now running his own practice. William had been released from the hospital the previous day, his color improved and his determination undiminished. Most importantly, David had successfully retrieved all our evidence from his backup server, including the damning security footage from the family confrontation. Remember, Catherine advised as we gathered in a coffee shop across from headquarters, this isn't a legal proceeding, it's a shareholder meeting. The rules of evidence don't apply, but optics matter tremendously. You need to appear reasonable, professional, and above all, credible. William straightened his tie, still looking slightly pale but resolute. I've spoken with several board members privately. There's uncertainty brewing. Howard's been increasingly agitated, and Barbara's aggressive tactics have raised eyebrows. They're ready to listen. At precisely 8:50 a.m., our small group walked into Morgan Industries for the first time since my termination. The security guard at the front desk did a double take but said nothing as William presented his shareholder credentials. We were directed to the main boardroom on the top floor. The elevator doors opened to reveal Barbara standing with Bradley Thornton, engaged in intense conversation. She faltered mid-sentence when she saw me, her usual composure briefly slipping. Rachel. William. I wasn't aware you'd be attending in person. Shareholders have that right, William replied pleasantly. As do their legal representatives. Bradley stepped forward, every inch the attack dog in an expensive suit. Miss Morgan's shareholder status remains in dispute. We're aware of your filings, Mr. Thornton, Catherine interrupted. Just as we're aware they're designed to delay rather than resolve. Shall we join the others? I believe it's time. The boardroom fell silent as we entered. The long mahogany table was surrounded by familiar faces, board members, executives, and key shareholders. My father sat at the head, looking haggard and tense. Stephanie and Tyler flanked him, both avoiding eye contact. We have an agenda to follow, Bradley announced immediately. Unscheduled speakers will need to— Point of order, William interrupted, his authoritative voice filling the room. As a founding shareholder with 15% voting rights, I move to amend the agenda to include a presentation regarding the proposed sales irregularities. James Bradford, the board member who had spoken to us privately, seconded the motion immediately. A quick vote followed, with the majority supporting William's request despite Bradley's objections. Very well, my father conceded, looking displeased. William, you have the floor. Actually, I'm yielding my time to Rachel Morgan, shareholder through the Patricia Morgan Trust and former VP of Operations. I moved to the front of the room, connecting my laptop to the projection system. The faces around me reflected everything from hostility to curiosity to concern. Thank you for allowing me to speak. What I'm about to present will be difficult for many of you to hear, but as shareholders and stewards of Morgan Industries, you deserve the complete truth before voting on the proposed sale to Meridian Capital. For the next 45 minutes, I methodically presented our evidence. Documentation of Tyler's embezzlement, Barbara's kickback scheme with suppliers, the systematic campaign to discredit me using falsified evidence, and the below-market valuation of the sale to Barbara's brother's investment firm. This sale isn't designed to benefit Morgan Industries or its shareholders, I concluded. It's structured to benefit a select few at the expense of the company my grandfather built and that many of you have dedicated your careers to building. Barbara rose immediately, her face a mask of righteous indignation. This is absurd. These allegations are coming from a disgruntled former employee who couldn't accept being passed over for advancement. The so-called evidence was obtained illegally and is being presented without context. Is that so? I clicked to the final slide, still images from the security footage of our family confrontation, showing Tyler's rage and Barbara's calculated manipulation. This footage comes from the Morgan Estate security system installed by the company and backing up to company servers. I'd be happy to play the complete recording. That's a private family conversation, Barbara protested. It has no bearing on— It has every bearing, I countered, when it captures company officers discussing financial misconduct and admitting to fabricating evidence. The room erupted in murmurs. Bradley Thornton whispered urgently to Barbara, who shook her head in refusal. My father hadn't spoken throughout my presentation, his expression unreadable. Now he looked directly at me for the first time. What exactly are you asking for, Rachel? 3 things. First, the immediate cancellation of the proposed sale to Meridian Capital. Second, a full audit of company finances by an independent firm. Third, the restructuring of company leadership to remove those who have violated their fiduciary duties. Bradley scoffed. You expect the board to cancel a $180 million deal based on unsubstantiated allegations? Actually, Catherine interjected, we've submitted all evidence to the SEC and the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. Their investigations are pending, but either way, this sale won't be proceeding as planned. The revelation landed like a bomb in the boardroom. Several board members exchanged alarmed glances, while others leaned in to whisper urgently to their neighbors. The tension escalated further when Stephanie suddenly stood. It's true, she announced, her voice shaking. Most of what Rachel said is true. She turned to our father. I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't do this anymore. I never closed the Westbrook deal. That was all Rachel. I was in Aruba with friends. Stephanie, sit down, Barbara hissed, but my sister shook her head. No. I've been taking credit for Rachel's work for years because you insisted it would balance the succession plan. But this has gone too far. She looked at me, tears forming. I didn't know about the fabricated emails or the embezzlement, I swear. I just went along with what they told me. Tyler leapt to his feet, pointing at Stephanie accusingly. You lying bitch! You knew everything. You helped Barbara plant the business plan in Rachel's files. Mr. Morgan, control your son, demanded Thomas Reed, one of the oldest board members. But Tyler was beyond control. He lunged toward me, eyes wild with rage. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always Daddy's favorite, always the brilliant one. 2 security officers who had been stationed discreetly by the door moved quickly to restrain him. Get him out of here, my father ordered, his face ashen. As Tyler was escorted from the room, still shouting obscenities, Howard turned to the assembled shareholders. I request a brief recess to confer with counsel. Before we recess, I said firmly, the shareholders deserve to know the true value of Morgan Industries. The proposed sale price of $180 million is approximately 60% of fair market value, according to 3 independent appraisals we've commissioned. I distributed copies of the valuation reports. Meridian Capital is getting a steal, quite literally, while key executives receive side benefits not disclosed in the deal structure. That's enough, Rachel, my father said, but his tone lacked conviction. Is it, Dad? Is hiding the truth from shareholders who trust you enough? Is stealing your daughter's career and reputation enough? Where does it end? The room fell silent as father and daughter locked eyes across the boardroom, decades of complicated history hanging between us. Finally, one of the board members, Janet Phillips, who had been my mother's friend, spoke up. I move that we postpone the vote on the Meridian acquisition until these allegations can be properly investigated. Seconded, said another board member immediately. All in favor? William asked, taking control of the meeting. The vote was nearly unanimous, with only Barbara and Bradley abstaining. Additionally, Janet continued, I move for the temporary suspension of Barbara Morgan, Tyler Morgan, and Stephanie Morgan from their executive duties pending investigation, with William Preston serving as interim CEO. This vote passed as well, though by a narrower margin. As the meeting adjourned, shareholders clustered in small groups, discussing the shocking revelations in hushed tones. Barbara exited quickly with Bradley, her expression thunderous. Stephanie approached me tentatively, but I wasn't ready for that conversation and moved away to confer with Catherine. As people filtered out, I found myself alone with my father in the emptying boardroom. He stood by the window, looking out at the Boston skyline, suddenly appearing much older than his 65 years. You didn't have to do it this way, he said without turning. You could have come to me privately. Like you came to me before believing lies about me, before excluding me from the sale, before destroying everything I've worked for. He turned then, his expression pained. I believed I was protecting the company. No, I shook my head. You were protecting yourself and your retirement fund. You chose Barbara's manipulation over your own daughter's integrity. You didn't just betray me, Dad. You betrayed everything this company stands for. Everything you and Mom built together. For the first time, I saw something break in his carefully maintained facade. Your mother, he said quietly, she would be ashamed of what I've done. The simple truth of his statement hung in the air between us. No justifications, no excuses, just the painful acknowledgement of how far he had fallen from the man she had loved, the father I had admired. Yes, I agreed, she would. As I gathered my materials to leave, he spoke again. What happens now, Rachel? I paused at the door, considering the man who had been both my hero and my greatest disappointment. Now we rebuild, Dad. We salvage what's left of the company's integrity and your legacy. Whether you're part of that process is up to you. I left him standing alone in the boardroom that had been his domain for decades, knowing that whatever happened next, nothing between us would ever be the same again. 6 months after the shareholder meeting that had changed everything, I stood in my new office on the executive floor of Morgan Industries, reviewing the latest quarterly projections. Spring sunshine streamed through the windows, illuminating the space that had once been my father's. The changes at Morgan Industries had been substantial. The independent audit had confirmed our allegations, revealing financial misconduct extending beyond what we'd initially discovered. The sale to Meridian Capital had been permanently canceled, and the company was operating under a new management structure with William as temporary CEO and me as Chief Operating Officer. Barbara faced multiple charges related to the kickback scheme and was awaiting trial, having refused a plea deal that would have required testimony against others involved. Tyler had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges in the embezzlement case, and was currently in a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. Stephanie's situation was more complicated. After her confession at the shareholder meeting, she had voluntarily stepped down from her executive position and entered therapy. To everyone's surprise, she had recently requested to return to the company in an entry-level position, expressing a genuine desire to learn the business properly. Miss Morgan? My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your father is here for your meeting. Send him in, please. Howard Morgan entered cautiously, as if unsure of his welcome in the space that had been his domain for decades. At 66, he looked older but somehow more at peace than he had 6 months ago. Rachel, he nodded in greeting. The building looks good. I noticed the new signage in the lobby, just refreshing the original logo grandfather designed. William thought it was important to reconnect with our roots. He nodded, taking the seat across from my desk. Since stepping down as CEO, Howard had maintained a non-executive role on the board while focusing on making amends, both personal and professional. I received your email about the restructuring proposal, I began, shifting to business mode. Your suggestions about the manufacturing division make sense, but I have some concerns about the timeline. For the next hour, we discussed company matters with professional courtesy. The awkwardness between us had diminished over months of careful interaction, replaced by a working relationship built on cautious respect. It wasn't the father-daughter bond I had once treasured, but it was something we could build upon. As our meeting concluded, Howard pulled an envelope from his briefcase. I wanted to give you this in person. I opened it to find a handwritten letter, several pages long. The heading simply read, "To my daughter." "You don't need to read it now," he said, rising to leave. "It's just some things I've needed to say for a long time." After he left, I sat alone with the letter, running my fingers over the familiar handwriting. 6 months ago, I would have torn it up without reading. Now, I carefully folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. I would read it, but when I was ready. Later that evening, I joined William, Catherine, Kayla, David, and several other colleagues who had become friends through our ordeal for dinner at William's recently purchased Boston apartment. The gathering had become a monthly tradition, a way to maintain the bonds formed during our fight for justice. To Morgan Industries, too, William toasted, raising his glass, and to Rachel, who reminded us all what integrity in business really means. As conversation flowed around me, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something useful. A reminder of the importance of vigilance, of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. "Penny for your thoughts?" Catherine asked, joining me by the window overlooking Boston Harbor. "Just thinking about how different everything is from last Thanksgiving," I admitted. "I never imagined I'd be where I am now." "Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our greatest strengths," she observed. "You didn't just save your position, Rachel. You saved the company." The following Sunday, I attended a family therapy session with Howard and Stephanie. These meetings had been ongoing for several months, painful but necessary steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. Barbara refused to participate, but Stephanie had embraced the process with surprising commitment. "I spent so many years being jealous of you," she admitted during that session. "You had Dad's approval, the respect of everyone at the company. I felt like I could never measure up. And I spent years feeling like an outsider in my own family after Dad remarried," I responded. "Watching you and Tyler get effortless attention while I worked myself to exhaustion for the smallest acknowledgement." Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, nodded encouragingly. "This recognition of each other's pain is important progress." Howard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emotional discussions remained difficult for him, but he was trying another small step in a long journey. One year after the Thanksgiving dinner that had changed everything, I hosted a small gathering at my newly purchased home in Cambridge. William came with his daughter Jennifer. Catherine brought her husband, and to everyone's surprise, Stephanie accepted my invitation, arriving with a homemade pie and obvious nervousness. The conversation was sometimes stilted, sometimes surprisingly easy. We carefully avoided certain topics while finding unexpected common ground in others. It wasn't the boisterous family gathering of movies or greeting cards, but it was authentic, a new beginning built on honesty rather than obligation. My father arrived last, looking uncertain until I welcomed him with a brief hug. During dinner, he raised his glass in a toast. "To second chances," he said simply. "And to learning that family and business both require the same foundation, trust." Later, as guests helped clear dishes, Howard joined me on the porch where I had stepped out for a moment alone. "I read your letter," I told him, watching his expression carefully. "It helped me understand some things." He nodded, looking out at the darkening sky. "I failed you, Rachel. Failed your mother's memory, too. I let myself be manipulated because it was easier than facing hard truths about Barbara, about the company, about myself." "Yes, you did," I agreed, not softening the reality. "But you're trying to make amends now. That counts for something." We stood in companionable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "The company is thriving under your leadership. Your mother would be proud." She always said you had the best of both of us, my determination and her moral compass. The mention of my mother brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I still miss her. So do I, he admitted. Every day. Inside, laughter erupted as William apparently told an embarrassing story from the company's early days. The sound of genuine joy, so absent from our family gatherings in recent years, drifted through the open window. The journey from betrayal to healing wasn't complete. Some wounds would always leave scars. But standing there with my father, I recognized that the greatest victory wasn't taking back my position or exposing the truth. It was finding the strength to rebuild, not just a company, but myself. I had discovered that my worth wasn't defined by my father's approval, my executive title, or my family's acceptance. The true measure of success was the person I had become through adversity, someone who stood up for justice, who valued integrity over expedience, who could offer second chances without forgetting the lessons of the first. As we rejoined the gathering inside, I realized that sometimes family business needs both parts of that phrase in equal measure, the professional standards of business and the compassionate possibilities of family. Finding that balance would always be challenging, but for the first time in years, it seemed possible. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Has your family ever disappointed you or betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Until next time, remember that your worth isn't defined by others' treatment of you, but by your own integrity and strength.